This demonstration is in response to a student's question, and I do in fact get lots of questions in this vein. It's, Nicola, I've got a hard edge on my paint that has dried, what do I do? Nicola, I've put another layer of colour on and I've lifted the layer off below. Now these especially are of concern to beginners, and the bad news is that this is really just a question of experience and practice. But the good news is I'm going to show you as best as I can a bit more to explain how it works and how to avoid such things. Now I've mixed just a puddle of some murky green here, and I'm going to film this in one go, so it might go on for a bit because we want drying time. The question usually arises in my beginners course when they're painting the apple. So I'm going to do a circle of green there, and I'm going to do another circle of green there. It's all about the drying cycle with paints, with watercolour paints particularly. They say if you can make a perfect circle, it's a sign of madness. I don't think that's completely perfect, but there we go. And let's do another one down here. Now, I don't know if you can see, but those are all very, very wet. Of course, that's a very thin. If I show you, look how runny it is. It's a very thin layer of watercolour. Now, you may not be able to see, but I will tilt the paper now. You can see how it's running, and you can see how shiny it is. That's because it's very wet. When it starts to go matte, as it's starting to there and starting to there, that's when it's starting to dry. Now, that one can't have as much paint on it because it's got a bigger, drier patch, a bigger, non-shiny patch. So I must have got more on that first one. But what I'm going to do is just drop more of the same colour into this apple. So let's imagine the light is coming from that direction. So all I have to do really is that. Don't agitate the paper, just drop the colour in, and if you want to you can move it around a bit. And it's at this stage where if you want to, you see that has all run into the middle because it's dipped, but I'm going to suck some out. Look how you can suck it out. You can also do that with a dry brush. So there's my highlight. That one's getting quite dry. I've just dried that brush off. I haven't rinsed it, just dried it off. And I'm just bringing that colour round a little bit. There's a puddle there because the paper isn't completely taped down, because I want to be able to move it a bit for you to see. Now this one over here, sorry I got something in the way, there we go. This one over here is touch dry, but it's cold. That means it isn't really, really dry. If it feels cold when you touch it, and I can just feel a bit of moisture on my finger, then it's not really dry. You can see that this paper is textured, so you've got the bits of the colour sinking into the texture of the paper. And I've also got a cat's hair. There we go. Right, so let's go back to the green, and I'm going to put another layer on this one, which is drier. Now I am just putting it on, hardly any pressure with that brush, so it shouldn't be lifting any paint off. But if I want to make that highlight a bit brighter, because it's dried out, take my brush, rinse it, take the excess off, and just agitate it a little bit to lift that colour off. Rinse the brush, dry it off, or just pull the excess off. Now, by doing it that way to get the highlight, as opposed to taking the colour out completely, you get a more graduated shade. Whoops. Now there you have got a hard edge. I'm going to leave that to dry, but here you've got a more graduated, and I'm just going to pull a bit of that out with my brush. A dry brush is like your paper, your Kleenex, your kitchen, whatever you want to call it. It will suck it out because it's dry. Let's show you here. See, that's evened that out a bit. And we can just soften that edge again. You're going to get some marks because the paper's textured. Now let's have a look at this. This is interesting because I have made the green out of lemon and ultramarine blue, and you can see where there's been some separation. The ultramarine has gone into the grooves more so than the lemon. That is interesting. Right, let's come back with this then. It looks like I haven't mixed enough paint. Rule number one, always mix enough paint. Now again, I'm just going on top, and that's quite dry now. And again, let's make the highlight there. I've just dabbed off the excess, and I'm just going to pull this out. And sorry about the hair. I've just been having a sort out in my studio. Ugh, not for the weak-hearted. Just rinse my brush off, taking the excess off, and lifting more paint off. Oh, let's get rid of that, if I can. No, you'll have to live with it, sorry. So there we go, and we can dab again to lift more paint out. So you've got various stages here. Now, it's better if you feel with the back of your hand. That one's pretty dry, that one doesn't seem to be quite so dry. So I'm going to mix some more colour. Doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same. It's probably a bit darker, but never mind. Not too far out. Okay, so I'm coming. Let's go to this one. It is a bit darker, my apologies. Do as I say, not as I do, dear friends. This is quite a bit darker. Now look at the difference there. There's less water, therefore more pigment. Now, see, I'm taking my time. There's no need to panic. Rinse the brush off. Take off the excess. And soften that edge. And we can just manipulate it a bit more. Add some water and soften that edge.